listening to CaveRadioBroadcasting.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts and do not reflect the management of CaveRadioBroadcasting.com.
Good afternoon and welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. Today's Thursday, February 9th, year of our Lord 2017. You're listening to a Gen Pop Media production. I'm joined today by usual co-host David Hooper.
Hi, guys.
We got Kat and Tony D. What's up, guys?
Hello.
Kenny's running the board, and Dave decided to pretty the place up and bring in the lovely and talented Mama Hoops.
Yeah.
How you doing, Ma?
Put your mouth close to the microphone. And I'm not making any jokes like I normally would make.
I didn't say a word, dude.
Mama, Julie Hooper, how are you?
I am fine. Thank you.
She was trapped into coming today because we
You
left
tricked her,
an
didn't you?
appointment. Well, you know, I've been browbeating her to come on
Yeah.
so we could crucify the Catholic Church. But all jokes aside,
DiBiase's going to be really sorry he missed this one.
I wouldn't have done that anyway. That was just a joke. But we had no alternative, so we just headed up Telegraph and got here actually early.
I
didn't even know
I
what
didn't
to
know what
do
to
with
do.
myself.
Yeah,
I didn't
that's
know
what I'm
what to
saying.
do.
We had like 8 minutes early. I was like,
Let's read a book.
I
Yeah,
made
thought
him
about
to
it.
be early here today.
Well, we are happy to have you, Mom.
She's a good mom. She was a good disciplinarian. growing up.
Feel free to chime in.
Thank you.
And feel free to smack Dave if he gets out of line.
Yeah.
We always do.
Absolutely.
We don't no wallflowers here. We want you to talk.
Yeah.
And does anyone here speak Spanish, by the way?
I think
You
you
do.
and Mom.
No, I
do.
know. So we can talk about them in Spanish, and they won't know what
Yeah,
we're saying.
but I can translate
See?
it on Google when I listen to the replay.
And I'll translate for my mom if there's anything you guys don't understand, because I get her dialect now.
Gotcha.
You know.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Did you
I
get
don't.
a tan, Kat? Really? Did you get your hair lightened?
Maybe Kenny's got
I
the
did
lights down to the right
my
level.
Hairdresser
Oh,
did something.
You look good.
looks good.
Oh, so she didn't darken her skin; she lightened her hair.
Yeah.
Like if I wouldn't have guessed the lightening of the hair, would you just have said, I have no idea what you're talking about,
Actually,
Dave?
I didn't think about it because she made it a little darker on the top but lighter as it goes down. It's called color melting.
Oh, nice,
pretty
nice. They have a
good.
name for it.
That's advanced technology.
Yeah, back in my day, it was time to re-dye your hair.
Yeah,
If
we
there's
just
any
had-
women
They-
listening,
they
I
were
want to give a
called
shameless
Roots.
plug to Rebecca's Hair Salon on, or no, it's called, I can't even remember what
Oh,
it's called.
you
It's
can't even
terrible.
plug
That's
it.
a horrible.
It
in
just
Northville.
became a shameful plug.
Yeah.
Whatever that place was, you guys need to go there.
Yeah, they do really good work.
It's a horrible plug.
We'll see if we can get get their stuff on the YouTube video.
Yeah, I think Solomon out east, he's getting close.
He's
to,
getting some stuff going on.
He is. He's gonna. I think we're gonna be able to do about an episode a week on YouTube.
Awesome.
We just got to pick the shows that we like. Some flow really well, and some it's just like driving over a glass road with 1920 tires. I don't know how else to tell you, but it's just
Yeah, we're still experiencing a little bit of a learning curve over here.
it's only our 70th show.
Yeah, well, what can you do?
Right. Anything else you wanted to bring up in the
No.
All right, so we're going to talk. I think we were going to talk a little bit about spiritual warfare and what the heck
Yeah.
that even means.
Right.
It's almost a cliche word, and if we get into it, I guess this would mean we end up having more of a biblical show today than a science or conspiracy or politics. But possibly we get into the Book of Revelation. Let's talk about who that beast is.
Okay.
But maybe not. We'll see. So
We'll see where
we'll
we end
find
up.
out.
Well, the thing I found interesting when I was researching the topic is that, 100 years ago, this stuff was all out in the open.
What we
You
talk
know,
about.
No, spiritual warfare. I mean, it was on when you would see a poster for a magician, and it would be right on there. I mean, there would be spirit realm stuff and things like that right in the advertisement.
Well, if you go back even a couple hundred years, not necessarily in the United States, certainly this was the case in France, that I can attest to. But it was illegal. It was illegal to have a tarot card reading place or anything that dealt. Again, this is one of those things that's written in the Bible where God goes way, way out of his way to say, don't mess with horoscopes, don't mess with tarot cards, don't mess with soothsayers and crystal ball readers. And that was one of those things I always used to just ask. Again, it was like, everything that's fun in this world, this guy's saying don't do it. What is the purpose behind this? But there is a purpose. I mean, I think we understand that now. So when someone says the word spiritual warfare, I want you to answer this in two different ways. And Mom, I want you to chime in as well. What does that mean to you guys today? And also, what did it mean to you 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago before all this enlightenment took place?
I thought spiritual warfare was a band from Seattle.
It probably is.
Wasn't there a couple guys from Nirvana in that?
All right, Kat. Mrs. Smarty Pants, let's start with you. What is spiritual warfare? What is that? When someone says that to you today, what does it mean? And is it something different than what it would have meant a few years back?
Well, a few years back, I didn't believe in God. So, but as I have grown in my faith, over the last 4 years, what it means to me now is that there are powers that we cannot see. Okay, and these powers are good. Some are good. Some are evil. And there's this thing going on in the heavenly realms. It's a battle. And spiritual warfare, I'll just get right to the point. It's basically Satan is trying to take every single one of us away from God. He's battling for our souls. And the battle is real, And I think if you look at the Bible, Ephesians 6 talks about this. And it says, Ephesians 6:12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. So right away that tells us when a person makes us upset, I mean, we shouldn't even really be mad at them because there's something so much deeper going on here. But it goes on to say it's against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places.
Now, actually, when you read that in the Greek, as it was written, those are actually ranks of fallen angels.
Correct. Yep.
So one thing I was going to clarify. So when you say there are these powers in the spiritual realm, I was going to have you distinguish between power as in gravity or electromagnetism, or are we talking about sentient beings, entities of some sort that are in this realm that we do not have eyesight for?
I think it's both. I mean, I think Satan whispers, Satan and his minions, I think they whisper things into our ears, you're not good enough, or, things that are just, when you measure the thoughts that you have up with the truth in God's word, he's the father of lies. But
well, when he whispers in my ear, he's like, "Hey, Dave, there's a strip club on 8 Mile that is a mere 3 miles out of your way."
Yeah.
That's why you're always 10 minutes late to the show.
If that was the case, it would be more than 10 minutes, and you just made me think of an idea. Why don't we broadcast from there and cut out the middleman on this one?
Because I'm allergic.
I don't think I'll be able to concentrate on the board.
Kenny,
I'm allergic to strippers.
You don't concentrate now, so I think we'll be just fine. At least you'll be totally happy. Tony, what do you think about when we talk about what is spiritual warfare? What does that mean to you, and what did it mean before, in quotation marks?
Well, before, honestly, it meant nothing. I wasn't that up on the subject to even have a comment for it. But since we started getting into some of these things, like we said before, as you start realizing what's going on, or see what's going on, you realize there's something deeper. So that's when you start investigating. And when you talk about spiritual warfare, I'm coming up with like a Russ Dizdar, who I've been listening to just because of that, trying to get her attention. So
she's like crackling candy in a movie theater. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead. I was going to make a joke, but go ahead.
But I think it's
Russ Dizdar.
Russ Dizdar, and he's got a whole package that you can listen to on YouTube. And I've gotten through like the very beginning. I listen to it before I go to sleep, and I usually end up falling asleep. And
I don't know if I want to go to sleep listening to Russ Dizdar.
No, I had some weird dreams.
I can imagine.
The funny thing is, you'll wake up in the middle of the night. There'll be some idea you just remember it, even if you're only awake for a minute. And there's it's almost like you were supposed to know that, or it was supposed to get encoded in you some way somehow.
And I've had that experience where you wake up at an important topic, and it's like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to listen to, and then I'll stay awake and listen to it for however long, and and then you end up falling back asleep. But it always plays into, and it always seems to be something that you've thought about beforehand. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. I'm now a believer that there truly are no coincidences, and that's one of the things I can't tell you how much I've learned doing this, because I just literally just about every night will fall asleep with some documentary or something playing on YouTube autoplay. So I won't know where it's going to go, and all of a sudden something will kind of jar me just enough into a coma or out of a coma of my sleep to remember the thought. And then I might follow up with it the next day, or it's planted in my head. And then there's a curiosity that's now created. I cannot tell you how much. And to me, it just seems beyond the probability of just being statistically random, because then that'll be couched by 2 or other 3 people in my life bringing up the same exact thing. So in a span of a week or 10 days, this subject matter has crossed my head four times or so, whereas I'd never even heard of it before. So, and that happens so frequently that it could be the cocktail party effect. When you guys know what that is? Mm-mm. You're when you're at a cocktail party, you hear nothing but white noise. But actually, the way your mind works is you're hearing everything.
Sound like this?
Yeah, that would be the movie theater effect. But if someone were to say your name, that all of a sudden you clue into that.
Pick it up.
Exactly. And there have been a lot of experiments done on this, but our minds process much, much more information than reaches our consciousness. And that's why some of these these MK Ultra trained agents, the Jason Bourne types. This isn't science fiction. They literally can take a mental picture of everything that's around them, and they know how to save it. And then when you need to go find a license plate of a car or a little detail, you can literally just go and access that memory picture. And you can learn how to do that to a certain extent. So there's a lot more going on in our minds than what reaches our consciousness. The subconscious is an incredible storehouse of information, it's sort of interesting because we're talking about spiritual warfare, and that is where a lot of the spiritual warfare is fought. To give you an example, do you guys remember that, ever hearing about that experiment where, I think this was in the 1960s, and think about this, because it used to be illegal to put subliminal messages in television ads. Do you guys know that? It used to be against the law. Think about that. Someone had to because there was a reason back when we were more connected to our roots. But they've done the test where they would flash one frame of a movie, a picture of some popcorn, and they'd measure the popcorn sales of that theater versus the main group that did not have that image inserted, and the sales of popcorn at the theater that flashed the image was consistently higher than anywhere else. It was having an impact. And if you guys I don't know if you guys, this is something, if anyone's listening, you should YouTube. Remember it when we were kids? So this would have been in the early 70s. They were still doing this. This was certainly happening in the 60s, where the networks, when they would sign off at the end of the night, did you ever see when they would sing like America the Beautiful, or
it was a national anthem, usually a flag waving,
before the test pattern came out.
Yeah, before the test pattern.
All right. This will creep you out. And this is one of the wonders of the internet. And before you go scoffing, you know how I feel about scoffers of the internet. Yeah, there is absolute garbage on there, but we have access to the biggest library in human history. You can go review those in slow motion. And I did this about a year ago, and what I saw, well, nothing makes my jaw drop anymore, but let's just say it made my jaw drop in a sense. So while the words of whatever, I don't even remember the song, but let's just say it was America the Beautiful. As those words were coming across the screen, as they left the screen, flashing were these messages of buy this, buy that. And you can go find that on YouTube now. It was very, frankly, creepy. And I don't know if that was before or after the subliminal law. I don't even know if that law is still in effect. If it is, everyone's breaking it.
Well, we talked about a couple shows ago, I think we talked about the Smith-Mundt Act or whatever that was, about the propaganda. They had to actually outlaw propaganda
against American citizens, yeah.
But they could use it against other.
I don't think I was here for that episode.
You may not have been.
Tell us about it.
Okay, I believe it's called the Smith-Mundt Act.
I believe you're correct.
And it was about exactly what Howard said. You can't use propaganda against American citizens.
Against American citizens.
The media,
okay.
The media cannot use. The government cannot use the media to
anywhere else in the world they can.
Right, and they do. Through other countries, they put out American propaganda. Well, that act ended, and I don't know if they didn't renew it, if it just ended, if they put an end to it. But now that law is no longer in effect, so you can use propaganda against American citizens with the media, which makes
in
sense
a sense, they've been doing it constantly so often that we don't even notice it anymore. But if you think of it, and don't get me wrong, because the people that have gone to fight for our country, I hold in the highest regard. My mom here was married to a man that was in the Navy. He was in flight training during World War II. A lot of his friends were the same guys that were part of the complete invasion of Europe, his high school friends. And I have the highest regard for all branches of our military. But think of it like this. Here's how well propaganda works. We all know, I mean, is anyone here still questioning 9/11? And I'm even asking you, Mom, do you even question 9/11? Like, Sometimes?
Well, as far as question, you mean whether
it was done by 19 Saudis that hijacked airplanes, or whether it was an operation conducted by elements inside of our own government.
Mm-hmm. I believe with you, like after watching your excellent documentary you made.
Oh, thanks.
That
now that's a good plug.
Yeah. Dave Hooper, YouTube.
And that's agdmovie.com.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Better plug. So anyway, yeah, you watch that, and I think there's the term they always throw out, cognitive dissonance. That whenever you say something like that, you're immediately not a patriot. You're not a... And it even goes to, I don't know if you
well, that's propaganda right there.
Right.
It's sort of, George Bush gave a speech at the UN a few weeks after 9/11, and the words were something along the lines of, let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories, lies meant to yada, 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 yada. So now that and a million other little messages start to go at work, and we get to the point where someone with an alternative idea gets made fun of. Although there's a shift going on in this country it's pretty sizable. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're like conventional guys. We've got lawyers here and businessmen, people from all education levels, backgrounds, and they're waking up to what's really going on behind the scenes in our nation. But that propaganda has done a lot to stifle a conversation that is so important. I mean, we are in danger of losing this nation if we don't start having more of it.
Well, I believe that totally. And watching, I was watching a show called The Five on Fox. And usually it's a pretty decent show because, it's kind of lighthearted and they get into some subjects. But it went around the table about 9/11. And they all basically said, oh, it's, this conspiracy theory. If you believe something like that, you're a horrible person, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there to myself, I'm like, wait a minute, you people are the news. They're the ones that we're getting our news from,
Yeah.
and they're throwing that out. And it's like, did you even investigate it? Because after watching your show once again, you start using your head and you think, wait a minute.
No, they
this is not right.
investigated it, and they know.
Yeah,
They're just blatantly lying.
And
That's
doesn't
what
it
I
seem strange that, because I know what you're talking about, and I've heard other newscasters say things like that, but they don't just say, there are people out there that believe, blah, blah, blah. No, they take it a
they
step
attack.
further. They and you're just
Attack.
Yeah,
a
they
whack
attack.
job if you.
Yeah.
I mean, they use very descriptive words and
Because
make
there's
it-
a lot of people out there who trust those people, man. How many people trust Peter Jennings?
Well, that's just it.
You know?
I can produce 15 ex-NASA astronauts that all have claimed that there is something in our skies. Okay, but if Anderson Cooper says that anyone that says that's wacko, you'll never you'll never look for the 15, you'll never hear about it.
And all they'll be talking about is how perfect his hair was. Be like, oh, did you see Anderson Cooper last night? His hair was awesome.
Well, that's how we have become just absolutely baseless reality television show driven.
The Kardashians. Explain it.
We're on a treadmill of our body and mind. These things that seemed like victories. We now have both parents working, 2 tax incomes, trying to make ends meet. The state, the government is teaching our children essentially 8 to 10 hours a day. Go take a look at what Common Core math is. You tell me if you think that's a good idea.
That would be no.
Yeah, it's they're dumbing us down on purpose. It's happening not just through our mind. It's happening through the things they put in our water, like fluoride, which is essentially rat poison. And it's interesting because this also, I think, leads to the topic of spiritual warfare, because this thing is being conducted.
Let me close out Smith-Mundt real quick, just for our listeners. If you want to look it up, it's Smith-Mundt, M-U-N-D-T. It was enacted in 1948 as part of the U.S. Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948, and it was repealed. It was not. It did not expire. What happened was they snuck it in to the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2013, which basically is just like, and Smith-Mundt, let's just not talk about that anymore. So it happened in 2013. So anybody wants to blame it on Donald Trump or George W. Bush, you can't.
Well, that's a funny thing. Everyone's now blaming everything on Trump because that's what's coming from the media.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, these are the same people who excused Obama for 8 years and blamed everything on Bush.
Yeah, but they're locked into a box. You're either on the right box or the left box, right? That's where the media wants you, okay? Because they can control us that way. But it's funny because let's say it was true that they're saying Trump is literally Hitler, okay?
Okay.
Now, the way they're going about it now, the way the media is going about it, is they're jumping on every single topic that you can go against the guy on. Right?
This guy could win an intercelestial lottery and pay off the national debt, and they would find something wrong with it.
Absolutely,
they'd be mad because they didn't do it quick enough.
Yeah, but the danger I see in that is that if that were the case, if he were a bad guy, if he were Hitler, and all this stuff goes on, it's like the boy that cried wolf, right? So you're just going to get overloaded with, I
agree with you.
So now it's just everything you hear from is like, oh, you can't listen to them. That's BS, and their credibility is out the window. So
this all again ties in with the Book of Revelation. Mm-hmm. It all ties right into the Book of Revelation. I don't know the exact verses. I'm sure Kat will help me out. But they talk extensively in the Book of Revelation about, the opposite becoming true, that everything that's bad is good and everything that's good is bad, and black being white and white being black. And that's what I see going on right now.
Yes.
It's like the things that are wrong, that were wrong 20 years ago and will be wrong 20 years from now, are now excused, accepted, and justified. And they're making to bring up this was a show from last summer. We were talking about the Great Bathroom Act that defined Obama's 8 years in the White House, and I brought up an article from Chicago, Dave's beloved second home, where they had put together they didn't want to discriminate against the boy who thinks he's a girl and not allow him in the girls' locker room because he thinks he's a girl. So what they did was they decided to put together a private bathroom where just one person could shower at a time. There was a group of Christian kids there. They never said a word against the other kid. They decided to use the private bathroom, and then they were mocked and ridiculed by the rest of the student body because they made the choice. That's just crazy.
Well, if you think about it, what this television set convinces us of and makes us do, if I were to explain it, it's almost you can't even talk about it in reality. You have to talk about it through a fictional story. But going back to the 9/11 example in propaganda, now anyone that has used their own brain and done even the most basic of investigations, their own investigation into 9/11, I mean, it is so. You don't need to watch my movie. There's a million movies out there.
I knew it stunk long before I ever met you.
If for no other reason, if you've ever played with Legos and you build a tower and you just drop part of the tower on itself, it is not going to crash through itself, turning itself to dust. There were other forces at work with that. But there's always a million little untangled wires. So, and you can find the proof. I mean, at the end of the day, I'd stake my life on it. That
there's an abundance of information.
Yeah, and it'll never be tried in a court of law. And it's really, I'm not even interested in discussing with anyone. If you haven't looked into that or you can't get your arms around it, your cognitive dissonance is just too hard at work. Yeah. It's almost in a way it's cowardice, and I really have no interest in talking to you. But let's look at this in an Orwellian through an Orwellian set of glasses here. The people that truly control this country. And does anyone disagree that these are the powers behind the central banks, behind our Federal Reserve System?
Not me.
The money changers. Every single president we've had up through Kennedy, he was the last one that I can remember, warned us about these guys.
Yeah. And most recently, Ron Paul.
Well, you'll get a lot of warnings without a doubt. It's utterly dangerous. I've given examples before of if I'm going to print the money from my little hometown, I will be their king in less than 24 hours. They will, and all I have to do is turn a hand press. This is the problem of having cash in circulation that is not backed by gold, because you're going to allow someone to become your king. Now, these are the same people that literally control our media. And they do it not because every little on-the-street reporter is, in on it, but the 5 heads of the 5 major media networks, which control everything from movies to news to television to student textbooks. I mean, they control the information they receive. And they get their power by setting up central banks. These are private companies. The Federal Reserve is not a federal organization. Their power is absolutely unchecked. Congress tried to even get an audit of them, and they just said no. And these people are dozens of levels above, say, a president. And if you think the president's the most powerful man in America, turn off that television set and please open your eyes. So here's the game. In 2000, there were about 10 countries that still did not have a central bank. Do you guys have any ideas what those might have been? Libya.
Pretty sure I know where
you're going.
Iraq.
7 of them are banned for travel right now.
Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, North Korea. You guys can look up the rest.
I tried to look that up. I didn't find it, so we'll have to
look it up right now. Just do countries without a central bank, and maybe you can fill us in on who the other guys are. So prior to 9/11, you've got our Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, saying we need a common enemy to unite us. Of course, thank you, terrorism. It came. The war plan for the invasion of Iraq was already made before 9/11. The Patriot Act was already written before 9/11. They broadcast this event on television. And actually, I don't know if they're doing this through some cosmic law or through mocking us, but they have so many programs predict this coming event that it is impossible for it to have been random. You know, little 9/11 signs here and the Simpsons, you name it. But that's irrelevant. Let's just leave that out. I think it just shows that they have complete control of the media and are subconscious, things that we don't necessarily observe consciously. So they pull off this total sham of an operation using advanced technology. That the 19 guys that were blamed for the hijacking, half of them were alive in the weeks after 9/11. Very easy to find that out for yourself. Through propaganda, we are taught to believe that this was done by, guys in caves, quote unquote. Muslims are bad. We need to go invade somebody. They didn't even try hard enough to give us... we chose Iraq, which actually had nothing to do with the 9/11 story that they told us to begin with. No one questions this because it's, unpatriotic to question something like that. We send our soldiers over there. Parents are, kissing their kids goodbye to go to another country where we've literally, at this point, our military, I think, is responsible for, 2 million deaths over there? Now, that's not our military's fault, but the evil power at the top of that pyramid, that's who I'm talking to right now. Not the guy following his orders on the ground. That's a completely different story. But the end result is, the guy at the top, you can control a lot of stuff from the top. As a CEO, and Tony, I'm sure you can say the same thing. You can control what your customer service people say without saying anything to them directly. You just do it through your chain of command. And so the net result is our soldiers are getting killed for a war based on a total lie. And even if you believe 9/11 was really done by some guys in caves, it wasn't done by Iraqis in caves, all right? But that's where we still went for some reason. Now, there is a reason.
They weren't even in caves in Iraq.
Have you discussed the PNAC document?
Refresh my memory on it. Sounds familiar, but I don't.
Project for a New American Century, I believe, is what the acronym is.
Okay.
That came out in September of 2000, and it described the countries that the U.S. needed to get control of so they could put in their military bases, and it was under the guise of military importance. Same, it was Iraq, Iran, Libya, Syria, North Korea, and I think maybe another one or two. That was out in September of 2000. It said we needed to go into those countries, take them over, and get control. That's what the Project for a New American Century was. And it specifically says in that document that that's going to take many, many years to be able to go ahead and do that unless there was a Pearl Harbor-like event.
Yeah, Dr. David Ray Griffin's book, A New Pearl Harbor, I suspect the title of that book was based on that document.
Yeah. And you can look it up. You can go to the internet and get that official document up. But it's just interesting that where I draw the conclusions from this that everything's tied together is that it started with Bush. He went in to Iraq with the military. We went and started taking them out, Afghanistan, and started going into the Middle East. Obama was going to come in and end all that. But what happened when he actually came in, he took care of Libya, started on Syria, covertly, through guns and terrorism. A little bit, he's going the backdoor route. We started all the stuff with Iran, so there's something coming up with Iran. There's something coming up with North Korea.
Egypt revolution happened.
Yeah, so all these things are coming up, and this is where you realize that if you want to call it shadow government or whatever you want to call it, that these presidents are basically puppets, just like you're saying.
There is absolutely, Tony, and you're totally right. There is another agenda at work, and you're just choosing blissful ignorance. Mm-hmm. But you know what, folks? Blissful ignorance is bullshit. You know what blissful ignorance does? It allows tax notices to become tax levies. It allows a problem in a marital relationship to become a divorce. It allows peaceful nations that have a disagreement. It leads to war. And it can actually cost you your soul. And I really believe that literally. That's how it is not worth it. And if that's your strategy of, I just want to party a little bit longer, just have some good times and not worry about this, that's not what made this country great, FYI. It was made great because our forefathers, our founding fathers, were highly alert to exactly what we have to reintroduce to the American public. That is why they took what an incredible gamble they took, taking sailing ships over in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s to a strange foreign land to get away from the very power that we allowed to essentially re-invade us in 1913.
And you're talking about the banking system,
the Federal Reserve Act.
Yeah, according to,
because that's what
in the year 2000 there were 7 countries without a Rothschild-owned central bank: Afghanistan, Iraq, Sudan, Libya, Cuba, North Korea, and Iran.
Yeah.
And that is the United States war plan. And I'll bet you now we're down to 3 countries. It would be Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea. I'm going to guess.
Exactly
Cuba, Iran, North Korea.
Iran, thank you.
That's exactly what we're down to now. 3
So, according to that senator,
this is going to sound like I'm making a wild prediction, but I'm guessing we're going to have a war with one of those countries soon,
I'm sure.
if not all of them. What senator were you talking about?
One of the senators was saying that Putin invaded Korea or something like that.
Look, the Russians are a lot like the Americans, and you have to understand that the guys at the top, the Rothschild banking dynasty, these bloodline families that can be traced back to the time of the Roman emperors, they own the media in Russia too, all right? And all the ads over there are saying the Americans are the great Satan and we're the aggressors. And then the ads are saying here, Putin's a killer. But you know what the truth is? If you're going to put yourself in power, you're going to have a gun put to your head, and you're either going to have to become a killer or you're going to have to go through what John F. Kennedy went through, which was being killed. One of the reasons I suspect he was killed is he wouldn't invade Cuba in the Bay of Pigs. See, and this is why Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, all mysteriously, if the CIA is so great, why do they all want to abolish the Central Intelligence Agency? Let me give you 2 examples. One is Central Intelligence Agency unilaterally, without even discussing this with the president, begins an attack using covert ops in their Operation Mongoose. They think that Kennedy, with that gun to his head, is going to be forced to give air support to this invasion. But Kennedy he basically says, I'm not going to play your game. I'm sorry, we're going to lose some boys today, but I'm not playing this game. He wouldn't do it. On the eve, and I mean eve, night before and I want to say these were in Paris, France, Khrushchev, Kennedy were to have a peace conference. And by the way, they tried to get, this was before the Cuban Missile Crisis, I believe.
Yeah, it's before.
What happens? A CIA base launches a U-2 plane with Gary Powers in it. Now, again, if you got your information from the television, just stop thinking and go do some real research. That plane wasn't shot down. It was actually wasn't fueled enough to finish its mission. He ran out of gas and landed in Russia. It was on purpose to keep that détente meeting from happening, and it was successful. I mean, the leader of Russia and the leader of the United States during the Cuban Missile Crisis, they really couldn't talk to each other. They had to talk to each other through back channels. Yeah. The movie 13 Days actually does a decent job of portraying it. So the Central Intelligence Agency, which we already know is an outgrowth of the Nazis from Nazi Germany, the occultic Lucifer-praising, demonized guys, that network, was brought over to the United States. 15 years later, they're doing the same thing that the Nazis, under a new name. You won't see a swastika anywhere, but it's something that's printed on their heart. These are bad people. That became our Central Intelligence Agency. And I think they've probably tried to start more wars than we'll ever know about.
Well, I think you're even talking about that whole Cuban thing going on. That was during the time of Operation Northwoods that was released also, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of 9/11.
Yeah, the Joint Chiefs of Staff came up with, it was either the Northwood Report or Operation Northwoods, which was a plan to, it was basically 9/11, but substitute Iraq for Cuba. It was a plan to for us to hijack our own American airliner with American students on it to make it extra, heart-wrenching. Exactly. And shoot it down, show scraps of metal in the water, and counterfeit some other ground attacks on Miami.
It was Miami and New York. They were going to have terrorist attacks.
Yep. So that the American people would not give any of our congressmen or senators a single problem in voting to go to war.
They wouldn't do that, though, right?
Dude, they've been playing that card since well before the Reichstag fire. It's the same MO throughout history. I mean, once you understand how the criminal operates, it becomes very easy to track them throughout history.
Well, even our involvement in World War II was orchestrated. There was an admiral in Washington that had confirmed information that the Japanese were planning an attack on Pearl Harbor like 48 hours prior.
Look,
and he just never bothered to. Do you think we should send this to command in Hawaii? Nah, it's okay.
The entire intelligence community of the United States knew 9/11 was coming.
It was a stand down, right?
The Vietnam War was started through a false flag event, the Gulf of Tonkin. World War II was started, false flag, the Reichstag fire. It was blamed on, I want to say, Polish Jews. I want to say it was a good question. Maybe you can look that up just to be sure. I wanted to say a Jewish kid that inflamed the country, and World War I was started when who's the Duke of Ferdinand was assassinated. Now, who do you think he was assassinated by? The equivalent of what would have been MK Ultra today. They've been doing the same exact thing forever, and it's so easy to see. And it becomes a spiritual war because what we end up doing as a nation is the result of 300 million individual thoughts or frames of mind. And what's happening right now is more and more of this population is getting their information from sources outside of that idiot box. And as they do, more programs and media like this one are sprouting up everywhere.
Yeah, because the problem is they're off the idiot box and they're on to Occupy Democrats.
Well, there is a progression. Look, it's a move in the right direction. There was a time where I myself was into the Occupy movement, thinking like that was the end all. I thought 9/11 at one time was the end all be all of conspiracies, not realizing, oh my gosh, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the very tip, because we're dealing with.
Yeah, it was communist, by the way.
It was? Okay, thank you.
Van der Lubbe.
Got it.
You know what's interesting? I'm going to bring this up before I forget. We're talking about when you bring up something like 9/11, you're not a patriot. You're anti-U.S. You're labeled all kinds of things, right? You're a bad person. What was interesting was the conversation between Donald Trump and Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Now, you heard this?
I read about it.
This was, Bill O'Reilly said to Donald Trump, how could you respect this guy? He's a killer. Okay, and then Donald Trump replied, well, there's a lot of killers and a lot of people have done bad things. And he said, what, you don't think the U.S. has ever done bad things?
Exactly. I mean, we're killers too. I mean, I don't like saying it, but it's true.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, you'll hear so much backlash on that. I'm sitting there yelling at the TV. because like you, it's like you have to realize that. The
But wait,
US
now where does that backlash come from?
Well, it's coming from the media, obviously.
Right. I mean, if you say that to someone in the supermarket, are they going to start screaming at you? Maybe if they've watched television that day.
That was our.
Do you understand?
I understand that argument because I'm using the same argument that with one of Howard's friends.
In my opinion, you should love your country, but not your government.
Right.
Government that's just the driver of your car. That's just who you've bestowed with leading you. And if they're not fit, don't confuse the people in government with our country. I love the United States of America, but I think a true patriot should question his government.
Yeah.
And not...
Well, we have to hold them accountable.
So
Exactly. It's been hijacked.
It absolutely has.
The government has been hijacked. It's been hijacked on both sides.
Jack Ruby said it.
Yeah.
He said there's a whole new form of government coming into place. I mean, this is going to be all over this book we've got coming out, but it will track this progression that has been going on. Well, it's been going on since the days of George Washington. And our first 20-some presidents did a great job of keeping the banks out, but they just kept getting more and more and closer. But for me, the final battle, the Gettysburg of the financial battle, was the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. And soon after that, the father of Charles Lindbergh, who was a senator or a congressman at the time, he's like, you people have lost your country. Good job, Congress, for taking off on December 23rd and allowing that vote. Because it won't take long, but through a series of depressions and inflation, this country will be in so much debt that it's going to collapse soon. And here it's only been 100 years later, and it's about to collapse. It'll collapse when they want it to collapse. I mean, we couldn't even... No president, no Trump, no one could stop it if they... No human.
Right.
If it hasn't collapsed, I think there are spiritual forces at work.
Well, that's one of the things that when we talk about Trump, and I think if Dave were here, he would say something like he's allowed to become president. You know, because the higher power allowed him to become president and put a pause on things. And this brings up a good point. We talk about the United States. It's you know, you'll argue, is it in the Bible? Is it not in the Bible? Is it relevant? I have to say every place is relevant when it comes down to...
I agree.
Not New Zealand. I'm just kidding.
Every place has to be relevant, though, because they're all people, right? And if the spiritual warfare is going on, then you have to get to as many people as you can. And I think one of the things that the U.S. was known for was being a God, one nation under God.
Yeah.
And it would be important. I would think it would be important in spiritual warfare to keep that.
Well, that is an equation, and that is essentially, you know, in the warnings in the Bible, God doesn't even say, I need everyone praying. He says, I need my believers praying. And the meaning, everything he does has multiple purposes. We know the only other nation I know of that was ever created with any sort of a covenant with God was Israel, which he loves. Don't get me wrong. But just like you love let's say you have a bunch of children, and it wouldn't surprise me if the one that you love the most, the one that you have the most hopes for, is the one you discipline the hardest. And his people, Israel, which have now essentially populated the entire planet. No, you don't have to be Jewish to understand. We are really, at the end of the day, we're all descendants of 8 people that were on a boat, or Adam and Eve, or whatever your beliefs are. Even scientists that are evolutionary will talk about how humanity at one point it's been squeezed down to just a few people, thousands of people, but that's another argument. He's punished nations, and he will punish. In fact, there was a president, I think it was some president said, I tremble for my country when I think that God is a just God. So that is part of the spiritual warfare, and it manifests itself not just in the spirit realm, but where the physical meets the spiritual. and someone had brought up fluoride. Maybe it was even me.
That was you.
But you're all aware that there are fluorides in our water.
Yep.
Does that strike anyone as odd?
Didn't until I started doing the show.
Well, why do you think it's in there?
Well, it's in toothpaste, too. That's why I thought it was in there. I never thought about it.
Well, it does have benefits, topical use for your teeth. But to be ingested, to understand what it does to you. In fact, I'll actually pull a quote out from... Kat, you're about to say something.
Well, isn't it the same reason why we allegedly don't have a cure for cancer when we probably really do? I mean, it's population control. It's poisoning, the water, and it's also keeping big pharmaceutical in business, right? I mean, I don't know.
The interesting thing is about this, you could have different levels. We kind of talked about this a little bit last week, I think. You can look at it on the level, because some people will explain it that it's a byproduct of manufacturing aluminum.
Yeah.
Right.
So someone went to Congress and said this is good for you and made a big deal and made a lot of money off it. So a lot of people argue that this is something, it's all about money. And then the other side, I think where you're going at, it's going as far as a health thing, to control people, to dumb them down, because your intelligence is supposed to be decreased.
There are
15 points or something. Plus, there's a lot of different things. Every way you look at things, you can look at it financially or health, and it all. The interesting thing is, it all boils back to the same thing and what's going on.
It always leads back to the same power source. There are many layers. There are many reasons that it could be out there. So many theories are floated, and in a sense, they're all correct.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fluoride. It is sodium fluoride is rat poison. That's just what it is. It was used by the Nazis in the concentration camps to keep the concentration camp prisoners pliable, keep them less aggressive. It does, it drops points off of your IQ. Mm-hmm. It has some other, here, I'm going to read this. This is from 1952 scientist by the name of Dr. E.H. Bonner. And he wrote this. This is the guy that was famous for Bonner's soap. It was from his company and his studies that Dr. Bonner of Dr. Bonner's soap fame was considered a brilliant scientist of his time, and he was the nephew of Albert Einstein. He warned of the dangers of fluoride in water in 1952. This was in a letter that he wrote. And let me just quote from, this was his public statement at the time. Fluoride had just now, there was this big, now who was funding the push to get fluoride? Because this is done at the community level. So this is actually the result of 5,000 small little municipal ballots. Who do you think funded that? Follow the money.
George Soros?
Well, you're going to find it. It leads back to the people involved with the central banks. And right now, the last holdout in the United States, I believe, is Portland, Oregon. And I think they're about to lose that battle because there are no benefits. If it's so important, why not put minerals in the water? So his quote was this: fluoridation of our community water systems can well become their most subtle weapon for our sure physical and mental deterioration. As a research chemist of established standing, I built within the past 22 years... Hang on, I got to make this wording bigger because I'm going blind. As a research chemist of established standing, I built within the past 22 years 3 American chemical plants and licensed 6 of my 53 patents. Based on my years of practical experience in health, food, and chemical field, let me warn, fluoridation of drinking water is criminal insanity. Sure national suicide. Don't do it. Even in small quantities, sodium fluoride is a deadly poison to which no effective antidote has been found. Every exterminator knows that it is the most effective rat killer. And I've got 20 other scientists talking about the same exact thing in fluoride. But does the news ever talk about it? No, they've got a cute cat video on today. And now you'll know why I never drink water. Gatorade. Of course, that probably has fluoridation too, so who knows?
Well, it's made out of water.
Now, here's the interesting thing that fluoride does. And this is where I think... So physically breaks us down. It, on a mass scale, lowers how long the population lives. It gives us less time to wake up to the reality of the world. It makes us dumber. Literally makes us dumber. Do you know that we're actually, this generation is the first generation who, supposedly, I got off mainstream, so it could not be, I'm not going to vouch for it, but the IQ of this generation is lower than that of its prior, first time that's happened in history in the United States.
Did not hear that.
It doesn't surprise me in the least.
It lowers IQ. It makes you more pliable. I mean, when people used to get upset with the Vietnam War, you'd see millions of people marching on Washington. Right now, you see millions of people marching to Pizza Hut or putting on some show or boozing it. That just we're gone. Like, our minds are gone. And here's the kicker for me. You guys have heard of the third eye.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
So it does another little interesting thing. Eastern religions have always thought that the third eye is the spiritual center of our body. It's essentially the communication center with the spiritual world. Drugs like DMT, marijuana to a certain extent, things like that, they have very acute effects on your pineal gland or pineal gland, however it's pronounced. And what fluoride does is it creates a little hard enamel covering over your pineal gland. In a sense, squelching it. I just think that that's an interesting byproduct of ingesting fluoride. And there's never been a doctor that can say one positive thing about ingesting fluoride. Yes, it's good for cavities and teeth. But since when does the government really care that much about how good our teeth are? Think about that.
That's not a honest reason for having it.
Exactly.
Sure.
I mean, if you're going to do throw some vitamins in there. I mean, we need vitamin C. We're deficient on a whole bunch of other stuff. Potassium. No, we're going to throw poison in the water.
Well, as soon as you find someone who makes a plant that makes enough waste byproduct that has vitamin C in it, it'll be in our water.
Do you really think so?
Yeah, as soon as it's profitable for someone.
I don't even think it's based on profit. So, I mean, you can use it as an argument, but I'm more and more when you start, going the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, the things that you're talking about right now, actually is the only thing that really starts to make sense, because they could have gotten rid of fluoride years ago. It never comes up in front of Congress.
I mean, it's never. I remember being a kid in kindergarten and being told fluoride is this good thing. Mm-hmm. Now, again, my teachers weren't evil; they weren't in on it. They're just doing what was handed down. And who controls the education department?
Exactly. We used to get fluoride treatments. Remember that?
Yeah.
Did you get those?
Well, it's still in our. It has uses as topical, but I don't think Alcoa, the Aluminum Company of America, Alcoa, I don't think their lobbyists are such studs that they've been able to get this passed in the individual water supplies of literally almost every community in the United States. They're just not that good, right. Nor would Alcoa spend that much money to get rid of their waste. They would. There's cheaper ways of doing it than fighting 10,000 legal battles. Mm-hmm. But somehow it's happened. Again, there's a bigger agenda at work. You guys wake up to this. I think we need to take a break, Howard.
Yeah, it's that time.
Before you go, your quote was from Thomas Jefferson, by the way. I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. That was Thomas.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfect segue into
Great
the break.
Great segue.
So
thanks, Tony.
We're going to leave with that quote. We will be right back. Welcome back to Down the Rabbit Hole. We're talking about the central banking system, spiritual warfare, shadow government, among other things. So, Dave, you had a tie-in.
Well, I guess this is the story that occurred to me. So you guys know that it was actually right about this week. It was about February 13th of 2011. It was right around Valentine's Day when I first had a question about 9/11. Until then, I'm not a conspiracy theorist on any level. I just asked that one question: why didn't the Secret Service get George Bush out of that classroom when they knew that there are as many as a dozen planes that are hijacked? So that basically led to the whole 9/11 story crumbling, which for me by itself was a shocker. And to me, it was the biggest hoax of all time. Yeah. It would take a few more years to realize that it's actually kind of small potatoes compared to some of the. And I used to get really upset because, I started down this road because our country was in trouble. And it's still, that is a noble enough reason to be involved in the 9/11 movement. But when you realize that the war, I think, should be directed at, the hierarchy, that the highest levels of who's conducting this spiritual war on Earth, because it manifests both in human form and in spiritual form. And I used to get really upset because we made a case for 9/11 with that movie that we made. And I'd go to look at other websites, and it used to bother me because I'd see these same websites that talk about the 9/11 conspiracy, and there'd be some drop-down menu where all these other conspiracies are mentioned too, ones that I just considered were total poppycock, from aliens to Bigfoot to Sandy Hook to 9/11 and Oklahoma City and on and on and on. I'm like, why would this guy discredit 9/11 by including all this other crap? What I did not realize back then was that guy actually, whoever was running, all these websites that grouped all this together, those guys were probably more spiritually awake years ago, certainly, than maybe we even are now, because they realized all of those essentially are operations of the same enemy. And that's where this thing, it does get biblical. It is. There's a reason we went to the Middle East, and the first thing we did, yes, we secured oil, but do you know that going to the ancient biblical sites and finding every relic we could was the first order of business for the military?
That is not talked about, but you will.
What you might have heard is the Iraqi. What was the museum that got raided? And again, the way the media sells the story, it's so.
It's cute. Oh yeah, this is. What
We've recovered all but just 2,000 pieces from that museum. Oh really? Okay, I'm sure the ones that weren't recovered. Now, what purpose they have exactly, I don't know. But a lot of people have connected this to what was happening with the Tower of Babel. And for some reason, there has been a chase to find literally anything with a remnant of the blood of Jesus Christ. Whether it's the sword. What's the name of the sword? It had a very special name that was used to poke him. Catherine, do you know the name of that sword? That the Roman soldier, or Mom, do you know the name of that?
I don't.
You remember that?
Dagger.
I thought it was a spear.
Yeah, the Spear of Destiny might be one of its names.
I've never heard of that.
And there was one of those conspiracy shows.
The Holy Lance, Holy Spear, the Spear of Destiny.
Yeah, Spear of Destiny. There was a conspiracy show where the limousine driver of some, basically one of these bloodline bankers was having a conversation with someone else in the car saying that they had acquired the Spear of Destiny and that it was a major coup. And I think it was for something more than just to sit on a mantle as a trophy, because it seems that these guys have been searching for a remnant of DNA of Jesus Christ himself.
Who do you think has been searching for that? I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's okay.
Well, at the end of the day, who wants it? I think the devil himself. I mean, what he's going to do with it, I'm not sure. I do believe that there's a devil. I believe that there are many ranks of fallen angels that we call demons. I believe also that there are disembodied spirits out there that used to be the spirits of what we call the Nephilim, these human-demon hybrids. And again, I can't prove that, but I've now seen enough. The Bible, or the books that make up the Bible, predicted all of human history in detail before it happened, to such astonishing accuracy that you could say I now have faith that everything else that's in there that I can't get my arms around, I do believe now. It's just I don't understand it yet for whatever reason, or I'm not meant to. But this has been a battle from. The reason for the flood was a battle of DNA, and when you understand how Noah, who was clean in his generations, he was blameless. There are a lot of different translations that muck up the conversation. You don't even need to go to the Book of Enoch, but if you go to what are called the apocryphal books, there's about 32 apocryphal books that were actually part of the scriptures in the times of Jesus Christ, but they got tossed out of what would have been the Bible at the Council of Laodicea as the Roman Empire, which now this was also predicted, that the Roman Empire would not fall, it would go hidden, and it would resurface in the last days. And what is the Roman Empire? Well, it became essentially, the Caesars became the popes. The popes had kids, and they became the dukes and the queens. They became essentially the European Union. And here you've got them now coming together to form. We were going to possibly talk about the beast of Revelation. A beast is a system, a political system, a governing system. And there's a beast with 10 horns. It's got 10 kings, 10 countries that make up the core of this group. And the harlot rides that beast. Now, I personally believe, and I'm open to discussion with this on you, Mom, because I know you've got deep sentiment for the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is a way to connect to Jesus Christ. I'm not going to make judgments about what's better or what's not. I'm just not a fan of any human organized religion.
It's the best.
All right, well, that's okay. I respect your opinion. I was raised Catholic, and it's hard. This is one of those things because people have been programmed to respond negatively just to even bring something like this up. But the harlot from the book of Revelation was involved in, now the word that's in there in the versions we probably have is prostitution. But you have to understand, this is not prostitution, sexual prostitution. This is prostitution of essentially the body of Christ and being involved in pagan rituals. The Catholic Church, for instance, celebrates Easter as one of its holidays, but Easter's origins were from Ishtar, who laid that golden egg, and then that morphed into
Easter was the Christ when he resucitó.
Easter's when
Easter.
It's interesting because that is what the Jews, the Hebrews, would call Passover. And, that was literally created so that Easter and Passover would never pop on the same dates, but they'd be around the same time, or so it seems.
Passover is different. Was when they leave.
Well, Passover comes from the mark of blood being put above the houses so that the houses would be passed over and the children 2 years and younger would survive, and the Jews celebrated that. And that's something I'd like to research more before we get into it, because I don't want to talk out my ass. But there are certainly there's paganism in every man-made religion, and that paganism, that is the enemy of God's religion, if you want to even call it that. Always has been. It went from Egypt to Assyria to Babylon, and then while in Babylon, Daniel predicts the rest of the future The Persians are going to come. The Greeks are going to come. The Romans are going to come. These are Satan's 7 great kingdoms. Then he's going to go hidden for 2,000 years and resurface in the last days. And you can actually, thank you, Internet, because you can actually follow the cookie crumbs back to the Roman emperors. And look at the architecture. Look around. The same penis of Osiris, the Washington Monument. If you don't think there's a hidden agenda here, Washington, D.C. is, quote-unquote, its own nation with its own laws encompassed by the nation of the United States. That same exact setup exists for the city of London. And there's another penis of Osiris there. That exact same setup exists at the Vatican. Little country, its own laws, penis of Osiris there. That is a absolutely pagan symbol coming back from the days of ancient Egypt. And we're building them in modern day. Look at our government buildings. Don't they look Roman?
Look at the giant penis that's the Washington Monument.
Well, yeah, that's what I
says. You know, like, I don't know. It's funny.
No, that's so that the same architecture is all over. The same eagle that was the sign, the symbol of Roman power. Follow that eagle. Look at what's the Nazi. I mean, the same eagle that's on the Nazi official. I don't know. Logo is not the right word, but same eagle there, and then came to the United States. It's on our money. There's a lot more meaning behind that than our founding fathers just picking some random bird and saying, "Hey, let's make that the national bird."
I think a lot of that stuff you're mentioning came from the Masons, the Freemasons. That's how a lot of that stuff was put together. And the architecture, the layout, the location. Like you said, there was a show on that on cable.
Yeah, and here again, you got to understand, the vast majority of Freemasons are good guys. They're not in it, and they don't even know what they're into. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine a few days ago, and when you talk to secret society defectors, here's something that happens inside of a secret society. So you understand, you enter in, and maybe you're recommended by a friend, or it's something good for work, and you're doing it because on the outside we do some charity work and it's good for business contacts. And then they begin to, in a sense, seduce you. And the same way, like if you walk into a bar and go up to a girl and say, "I want to have sex," odds are she's going to slap you across the face. But if you slowly work your way into, we have to be desensitized to it. So Freemasonry is set up with a number of degrees, and some claim it goes higher than 32. But at that levels of secrecy, I mean, who knows? These are now people that are blood-bought, Luciferian pledged people. Somewhere along the way, though, here's one of the degrees. Because with each degree comes a ritual, and a candidate has to do something to prove his loyalty in order to keep moving up the ranks. And they do this in such a devious way. It's evil. I mean, it can only come from the source of all evil. Now, I don't know what degree this is, but one of the degrees involves this. All the forwardly progressing members of some particular lodge or whatever, the things they've been asked to do, they start to get a little more outlandish, but they're not too far removed from the last one. I've already spent $100 at the casino. What's $125? That kind of mentality. So they reach a point where, just along the way, I don't even think this is very deep, they're asked to spit on a crucifix with Jesus Christ. Now, if you are a candidate and you spit on the crucifix, they say, "Good job. You passed." If you're a candidate and you say, "I will not spit on the crucifix," they say, good job, you passed. But behind the scenes, that guy's not going any further forward. They will only keep moving up the ones that pass the test by their standards. And you get to a point where it's blood in, blood out. At some point, they're asked to kill somebody. At the end, you renew your membership with a new oath. I mean, you're making an oath to someone you don't even know. Think about that, people. Anyone, if you are involved in that, and I think I've got a couple friends that might be, and from their perspective, they could pass a lie detector test and swear in a Bible. There's nothing evil about this organization because that's what they believe and that's all they've seen. But they don't know the real agenda that is at work behind those. And by the time, you reach our age, you're in your 40s, your 50s, you've got kids, you've got your social group, you've got a career, you've got college bills to pay for. It gets to the point where you can't even get out. And if you try, you're killed, literally. There are a lot of defectors out of those secret societies. Again, they'll never be paraded on Fox or CNN. And are there some hoaxsters in there? Yeah, I'm sure there are. Maybe some guys want to get attention or whatever. Now, why you'd want to get that sort of attention, I don't know, because all it does is put a target on your head, labels you as a conspiracy theorist, makes you an outcast in your neighborhood, and you don't sell that many books. So what's their motivation again? And why would hundreds of people across borders, languages, and even time have the exact same story? I can read you quotes from the 1800s talking about how evil secret societies are, how Illuminism had corrupted them, and the operation is the same every time. At the very top are the guys in the know and the ones with all the power. And they control the movement of the whole thing. Now, who's the guy on TV like our president? He's not the most powerful guy. He's just the most powerful public relations guy. They send some 7th, 8th degree member who's seen nothing but positive stuff to go vouch and verify there is nothing bad going on here. And he's not lying from his perspective. He's telling the truth. Now, in 20 years, you wake up slowly and there's never, because it's a slippery slope, there's never a day where you're like, I'm out of here. Because if you do leave, I mean, your career's over. And maybe much more. It's nasty, nasty stuff. And Jesus Christ warned us about it. That these things that operate in secret, you don't stay away from them.
We're talking about spiritual warfare and who are we fighting against and all that. And there's just a couple of points I want to make. One, there are 8 different names for the devil or Satan in the Bible, and they all essentially boil down to deception. The father of lies, the one who condemns, the day star. He's disguised as light. Satan doesn't show up.
The deceiver of the whole world.
Right.
Not part of the world, not a couple wackos down the block. The deceiver of the whole world.
Right. And the ruler of the world. I mean, he's in control. And that leads me to my next point. If you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 5, it says, "But Christ has indeed been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. For since death came through a man, the resurrection of the dead also comes through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive, but each in turn. Christ the first fruits, then when he comes, those who belong to him. Then the end will come when he hands over the kingdom to God the Father after he has destroyed all dominion, authority, and powers. For he must reign until he has put all enemies under his feet. The last enemy to be destroyed is death. For he, quote, has put everything under his feet." And then it goes on to say, now, when we say everything, of course, that doesn't mean God. And this is, Paul who wrote this. But so it's clear that, this battle, the rule of Satan is being allowed. I mean, God is the one allowing this to continue. Okay. So what's going on in the heavenly realms? Our prayers, when we pray, our prayers, I believe, angels, good angels, take our prayers up to God. I believe that there are real demonic forces stopping the angels at times from getting our prayers to him, in a timely manner. I know that is really hard to wrap your head around that. But
no, I actually understand it. I mean, there's a passage in the Bible somewhere where an angel was sent to someone, and the heavenly angel was held up 21 days by, this was a demon known as the Prince of Persia. And maybe you can get some background on it. But look, if the Bible story is true, our real enemy, these principalities, cosmocrators, Russ Dizdar, no, he loves calling them by their original Greek names. We're talking about many ranks of angels.
It's an army.
And this is beyond an army. This is, I mean, the amount of entities that are inhabiting this planet, if you understand, if you believe the Bible story to be true, which I do now, somewhere in heaven, before humanity started, there was a massive population of angels, totally innocent angels that never even knew a lie or knew anything. A third of them, now some of the calculations are into the billions of entities. That doesn't surprise me. There's 7 billion people on Earth. We pulled that off in a few thousand years. It wouldn't surprise me if there's billions upon billions of angels. But at one point, these guys don't reproduce on their own. They're literally created by God, hence the sons of God. And they also technically don't have a gender, but that's really doesn't matter. A third of these guys choose Satan, his side, and they're cast out of heaven to earth. They're now here on our timeline, in our domain. Now, they can't really manifest just anywhere. They need entry points, which all the don'ts in the Bible, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex, all these
don't
don'ts.
Go to psychic mediums.
Exactly.
Right.
Those are entry points. Mm-hmm. Like, if you think you're talking to your dead grandmother that died 50 years, you are not. You are literally, that is an open entry point. You are inviting a demon into your life that is posing as your dead grandmother. I know that's hard to believe, but a lot of people have gone to seances, and they walk out of there freaking out.
What's interesting is, what do we call liquor?
Spirits.
Right there, yeah.
When I can tell you from personal experience that spirits
Satan,
definitely...
I've seen Satan enter you.
Oh, gosh. I mean, yeah, I'm not...
I'm kidding.
No, I think... And look, and don't get this idea...
He's entered me, too.
From The Exorcist. Satan, he's too busy to even deal with you. Yeah, you're on his list somewhere, but he's got billions of soldiers. He's got millions of, literally, officers. And that's what principalities, authorities, go look up what those are. And there's many more ranks than just what was.
And their job is to break our connection with Jesus. That's exactly that is their number one goal. Because if Satan can use those temptations that you're talking about to keep you sidetracked, to keep you out of prayer, to keep you from going to church, to keep you from hanging with other believers, he is just systematically breaking that connection down. And before you know it, like you were talking about earlier, you're like, oh, where did God, what happened? You're just away from God. And some people, that's how they lose their salvation, I think,
Well, we're now living in a world where even 100 years ago, right as the Federal Reserve, in 1913, this was a very biblical country. The education happened around a Bible, around a hometown. Since then, we've given our education away to the state, which is literally in the control of demonic forces. If you believe the Bible, that shouldn't be a surprise. Satan was in charge of the world 2,000 years ago enough to be able to offer it to Jesus Christ. I don't think he just lost grasp or lost interest. Now, I don't understand what motivates this guy. Don't get me wrong. I don't know.
Who?
If Satan's a real entity,
Pride.
why doesn't he throw himself on the mercy of the court and just say...
Because he's full of pride. He thinks he should be God.
Yeah. He thinks he should be doing God's job.
Yeah.
Well, we discussed last week, we were trying to imagine what could motivate him, what could keep him going. And if the Noah story is true, which I believe it is, and I think just as the Bible says, it's on Mount Ararat. Mm-hmm. Now, here's something funny, because Mount Ararat's in Turkey. Guess who is in charge of guarding the perimeter of Mount Ararat so no one can go up? I mean, we've sent people to the moon, okay? But we haven't gone to the top of Mount Ararat. You want to know why? Guess who's in charge of it? I think you know, Kat. The Central Intelligence Agency. Think about that.
Yeah, why?
Wouldn't want anyone to find that ark because that might tell us that...
Hey, we got to do whatever we can to cast doubt upon the Bible.
So if Satan can get within 8 people... So if the ark story is true, that means he got within 8 people of winning. And he might think, next time I'll get all of them. That might be his plan. I mean, I'm sure it's got to be his...
He's too late.
Well...
I mean, that's it. It's already, it's done. It's finished.
And this is what... Like, does he not realize he's going to lose? Mom, what do you have to say about that? Put your mouth a little...
I want to say this. If you believe in God, you don't have to worry about Satan. Because he say, las puertas del infierno no prevalecerán contra él. He is with us.
The gates of hell will not prevail against my...
Then why be upset or nervous that something happened?
Well, I don't. Is anyone here upset or nervous?
The show.
No, I'm not. I mean, our main thing, Mom, is that we've woken up to this recently. We want to wake others up.
Yeah,
I've got friends who are still on the wrong side of the fence that I love, and I'm trying to share with them in a language they can understand the things I have learned over the last couple of years, so that they can spend eternity with me. And then there are those I have no intention of spending eternity with, so I don't talk to them.
Well, their blood's going to be on your hands, but
that's fine.
I'll say this.
I'll take it on Judgment Day.
I suppose Satan wants to take care of me, I believe in God.
Oh, you'd be a big prize for him.
I can be.
Oh, yeah.
I am no worry because I know what I'm...
Yeah, well, this show wouldn't really be directed at you.
No.
There's something that's become
at your son prior to the 9/11.
Yeah, it's directed at... Because if someone... And someone has. I mean, throughout... I don't think I went a year in my life where someone didn't come up to me and go... And I'm going to use the cliche, stereotypical voice just to be funny, but... Would you like to talk about Jesus Christ? Would you like to talk about being saved? That would... It got to the point where it was almost like I was revulsed. Like, I'm like... Please, dude. Yeah, I know. Everyone's told me...
For the first time in my life, I've owned a home for over 25 years. For the first time in my life, 2 weeks ago, a Jehovah's Witness came to the door, and I was nice to him.
Did you build a canyon in your backyard? So do you remember that?
No, they wanted to talk about God, and I told them. They wanted to quote the Bible, and I quoted the Bible right back to them, and they're like... Oh, would you like a copy of the Watchtower? No, I'm good. I go to a Baptist church, but that's cool. I appreciate it. You know.
Look, for me,
she wrote me a handwritten letter and mailed it to me.
Really?
Really?
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
I plan on writing her a letter back.
Good for you.
Yeah, there's a reason that you guys talk. I don't believe in coincidences.
No, it's the first because usually I find that so annoying. 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, they're knocking on my front door on a Saturday.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. If I'm out and about, engage me. You see me at a store, fine, let's talk.
Saturday, that time, I have a hangover. I'm not waking up.
The JWs are getting really aggressive because 2 summers ago, I was at my sister's cottage in the middle of the woods, and they pulled up in front of Annie's house, and the guy gets out, and I'm like, who's that?
Why is he wearing a suit?
In the middle of the woods, right? And for the first time ever, I chased, the guy, I started witnessing to him. And he was like, I got to go, look at the time. Dude. It was really funny.
They're going to have to send in some serious reinforcements.
They're going to need a busload of Jehovah's Witnesses to go after you, Kat.
It was just funny.
I do personally believe, and this message is not for everybody, but there are some people who would not react to Jesus is real type of comment.
Right.
Who will react to? Yep. Wait a minute.
We've had people call the show.
I already believe this conspiracy.
Quinn.
Quinn. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Exactly. Yeah.
Quinn from Seattle.
And then when you realize, because that's how it happened for me. I actually some people find Jesus because they have faith. I found him because I found it's not his arch nemesis, our arch nemesis. I'm like, holy cow. It took me about 9 months of full-time research
me too.
And being hit across the face with it. Because as I'm now beyond 9/11, I'm now following, follow the money. I start to realize, oh my God, the actual power the central bank has over our lives. They've got us running on this treadmill. We're being taxed. The money goes literally to their private little company. They hire the IRS works for them. They're not actually federal employees. They're not. They're private employees of a private business owned by some Europeans. Think about that. That's who prints our money. And money's what makes the world go round. I think it's why there's a warning in there. It's not money that's evil. The love
It's the love of money,
is the root of all evil.
So the question is, how do they get control of you, right? How do they get you to take the mark of the beast? And right now, the way I'm leaning is the whole money thing, to be able to survive. Because right now you can't. There's no one out planning their own foods and sustaining themselves, right? So
there are some.
There's some people that do that, but a far majority of people, if the economy crashed and
we're too paycheck to paycheck.
Kroger didn't have groceries delivered to them. There's a lot of people that are going to starve to death. There's a lot of people that are going to cause havoc and not be able to survive.
Look, it's a little grotesque, but we're going to be so hungry that mothers are going to be eating their own children.
It's like
it's a hard thing to say.
The Walking
but
Dead. It's really like the walking zombies, right? That's what I consider these zombies are the people that are your neighbors that are just out trying to take care of their family and find food and do these kind of. This is where the danger is. This is if you get into the government where they take care of you.
You see how difficult it's going to be for me to eat this boy.
Me? Are you kidding me? I'm like 2 good turkey dinners for you.
Well,
get some barbecue sauce and some mashed potatoes.
Here's
you can invite all your friends over.
So like we were kind of talking about, if you're starving and the government says, okay, we have a new monetary system. Here's your card. You're going to get this chip implanted.
No, it's true.
How many people are going to do that without even thinking if you're not?
Well, if you are not, and this is where the spiritual war comes in. A lot of people have dismissed this book like I did for the vast majority of my life because I just was conditioned to know, not believe, but know that it is a book of silly myths.
Here's what it says in the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verse 16. It says, also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. And, when you just said that, the book of Revelation, you look at it and go, it's crazy, it's silly. Most Christians, honestly, they don't even bother reading it. A lot of pastors won't bother teaching it. And what's really sad is if you read the first chapter of the book of Revelation, John points out that anybody who reads it and hears it gets a special blessing. Like, you're actually, if there are Christians listening, read the book of Revelation. There is you don't have to completely understand it, but read it or, have someone read it to you. God goes out of his way to give people an extra blessing just for reading and hearing this book read.
It's like an incentive plan because
it's God's gold star.
Yeah.
You can't understand the book of Revelation if you start off reading the book of Revelation because it's written in code. What are horns? What are diadems? What are a beast? What's the sea? What are raging waters?
It's so difficult to understand.
But all of it is decoded in the prior 65 books. You find out in Daniel that a beast is a system. You find out that the sea is a mass of people. And then you start to link back, and then you can actually read it like a regular story today. And it's almost like if a third of the angels fell, like we were talking about, God just lost a third of his population. And maybe that's what humanity is a way for God to replenish his ranks. But this time, not to do it with these untested entities that could go south or north, but with humans that have essentially gone through the equivalent of like a basic training. Mm-hmm. Meaning that Satan's existence here is part of his design, not a mistake. He is like that mean drill sergeant that you just hate. Mm-hmm. You know, we've seen him in the movies. But the guys that get past that drill sergeant are going to be better soldiers.
That's a very interesting theory. It's very interesting because I think that, it's logical for one. Okay, now they're talking about if these people were able to be deceived that easily, where they fell because they followed Satan, right? That would make sense. Where now I'm going to come here and you guys are going to go through this training program so that you have enough knowledge. You say, hey, you're deceiving me. This is what's going on. So that's kind of logical. That's an interesting theory.
If I was in charge of a platoon, all right, I would want the guys in my platoon to have gone through the hardest training possible. Because if you send me a bunch of dudes that just signed up and they have no idea what they're getting into, we're all going to get creamed here. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, human organization and the government of heaven, I don't know how much crossover there is, but I'll bet you there's some. And what better way? I mean, God protects the words of this book, which we won't even get into that conversation. But I used to get upset. I'm like, God, why don't you come down here and just do a light show and just appear in my living room, or just why don't you just? I mean, why all the cloak and dagger routine? And I think a lot of it is he doesn't want people that are going to get swayed by a light show. He wants people that, and he says, if you look for me, you'll find me. And I totally get what that means now, because I don't care if you look through history, through philosophy, through biology or genetics, or through astronomy. You take any of those fields to the nth degree, and you will find them. It's why Einstein found them. It's why our smartest Isaac Newton found them. All throughout history, these men that we think couldn't possibly have believed in God actually were the more devout ones, and we've just been fooled only in these last days into thinking something differently. And so, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll find out someday. But I think this 7,000-year plan, which seems like a long time to us, I don't think it's a long time. But he's outside of time because he can see the future, obviously.
Well, we kind of talked a little bit about that also, not on air, but on the side, where we talked about if he is back outside of our time constraints, that like Albert Einstein, now that you mentioned, said that time goes around in a circle. So if that were the case, all this has already happened, and what you're reading in this Bible is the story of how this all happened, and how it's basically saying how it's going to end. It's already happened, like I think Kat said a little bit earlier.
Well, with the details that have been given that were in print 2,000 years ago, I mean, there's just no other. Well, in fact, if you believe the stories in there, literally, a lot of guys were literally taken in their spirit form to see the future, like John in the book of Revelation. He went somewhere in spirit, saw what was going on in the last days. He didn't even know what he was writing about. He just wrote what he was told. And it's hard for us to imagine time not being linear. But time is it's a malleable dimension, like height and width and depth. Now, I just don't, frankly, understand how to manipulate it. I wouldn't be surprised if some people can, and I wouldn't expect a freaking germ to understand what it's like to fly either. I mean, they're essentially almost a two-dimensional creature. So you can understand the problem if you look down the line. It's just harder for us. Actually,
and this you're saying basically in this containment we call Earth, and our human bodies and everything. We're in a system, basically.
A lot of people argue that. I mean, some people call it the Matrix or this electronic representation, this hologram. And if you understand Planck time and Planck distances, you'd think theoretically that you can keep cutting particles down, matter down infinitely. But you actually reach a limit to how small something can get, and that's called a Planck unit. And the same thing happens with units of time. And at that level, which was also predicted in the Bible, that the building blocks of the world will be in the unseen small things. I'm sure I'm getting the wording wrong. But basically he's talking about particle physics. And at the subatomic level, what happens to particles is absolutely diametrically opposed to what we know about physics. At its most basic, smallest part, a particle is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It only is in a place when it is observed. Otherwise, it is randomly anywhere. I don't understand this. I'm almost just repeating the words of particle physicists, but they don't have what's called locality. They're not in a place. And if you know how to manipulate that, at the end of the day, we're made up of these atoms, these particles. But there's really no mass in it. If you think, okay, my hand is hitting a table and, it's solid against solid, but it's really not, because a particle is very similar to what we have in space, which is a little dot in the middle, a nucleus with the vast majority of the mass. And then there's just a ton of space, nothing, with a little electron or a little proton or something flying around, and everything else is space. And so what's really keeping my hand from going through a wall or through this table is the electromagnetic field that's created. And when those two clash, they can't, that's what actually stops it. It's not matter against matter. It's like magnet against magnet. But if you could manipulate that, walking through a wall or putting your hand through a table like this, or sending an aircraft carrier into the past, maybe is not impossible. I don't fully understand it, but it theoretically would be possible if you understand locality. And I don't understand enough about it to talk about it, but it's so bloody fascinating. I know enough to say that all laws of physics go out the window when we're looking at the smallest particles that exist. And maybe that's how God actually controls everything. It's through things like he said, it'll be in things you just can't see. And now we can see them. Psycho.
Let me ask a question now. We're kind of on a break.
Yeah, we're winding up here soon.
Right? We got 4 minutes left.
The interesting thing I found when you talk about religion, a lot of people who don't believe in God or the Bible or things like that, you've told your stories. I think we've all come from similar backgrounds, thinking that way. But the thing you have to come back to is that there is a book that was written. There is Jesus. There was a man. So all this stuff is not like it's made up and put into a book. There are those real things that happen. And I think you said several times that same stories, like in the time of Noah, it's referenced in the Bible, it's referenced in other historical documents. So one thing you have to think is, that is real. So how can you dismiss that whole concept when you know that you have real tangible things?
I'll tell you how, because people are honestly 100% spiritually blind. Just today, I was having a debate with somebody in a secret room on Facebook. And the debate all came down to, I was explaining to this atheist, really it comes down to one question. Because he wanted to talk about dinosaurs and the flood and the idea that the book, it's written by men, so it can't be true. And I said, let's start with Jesus. Who was he? Okay. And he said, well, we can't use the Bible to talk about Jesus because in his mind, He doesn't know that the Bible's true. I said, okay. I pointed to writings outside of the Bible about Jesus during his, not when he was alive here.
No, but even like Pliny the Younger.
Yeah. Joseph of Arimathea, right?
Josephus.
And so
he's a well-documented figure outside of the Bible.
And you want to know the response I got back from this guy? More books. You want to use more books? I said, how do you know who Julius Caesar was? How do you know who Alexander the Great was? Our debate ended because this guy wouldn't even look at other external writings outside of the Bible.
He just doesn't want to know.
Right.
He's made up his mind.
That's it.
Well, that's the blissful ignorance we talk about.
There you go. Yes.
And it's a very dangerous position to have.
I am open to the fact that I could be wrong on anything at any time.
Same here, and I have been.
As soon as someone, I've been wrong on a lot of things, let me tell you. And if someone comes to me with credible evidence against what I believe, I will absolutely look at that evidence. And if it's compelling enough, I may change my beliefs. It's going to have to be pretty compelling. But I'm open.
Well, what's interesting about that is there may be different beliefs, but this whole thing that we're talking about is being withheld from us. It's being covered up. It's being lied about. It's not like just, oh, yeah, that's a Bible and, that's what that says and it's okay. No, there's people going out of their way to disprove it, to hide information from. It's like you said about the CIA. Why would the CIA be in charge of a mountain in Turkey?
Yeah.
There's obviously things going on here that we don't know about. And
people just want to. There's plenty of theories, and we'll close with this. But there's plenty of theories out there that the reason why Hitler was obsessed with exterminating the Jewish race was to stop revelation, was to stop the Christ's second coming. Because if there can be no nation of Israel, there can be no second coming of Christ.
Right. If one prophecy could have been broken in that book, then somehow this is a victory for Satan. Yeah. And if there's no remnant to,
and there are many credible people who believe that. And on that note, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. This has been Down the Rabbit Hole. To God be the glory. Great things he has done. We'll see you next week.